Hi, greetings. How are you all? Am I audible to you all? Hi, am I audible to you? Yeah.
Hello, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so good day. Thank you so much for joining the expert session. Today in the expert session, we have our former graduate, Abdul Kamya. He graduated in September 2021. Hi, Abdul. We would like to hear from you. Can you just introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning everyone from this part of the world, Sierra Leone, West Africa. I'm Dr. Abdul Kabia. I'm the National Warehouse Manager for the National Medical Supply Agency, Minister of Health and Sanitation, Sierra Leone.
Abdul will start with the session today. Our topic is Module 6, Storage and Distribution. So I would request Abdul to share the screen and start with the session.
Yes,
Okay, so
I'm working on
just give me a
slide.
second. Let me share the screen.
Actually correctly the share, you know.
Okay, Abdul, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity for today's presentation on storage and distribution. So next slide, please. So as today we are looking at storage and distribution in this module, which is module 6 of the postgraduate diploma course. So we are going to look at basically we are looking at the storage. We want to look at the distribution cycle. We want to look at system design when it comes to distribution and the good storage practices. What are the resources and the cost analysis for the resources and the private sector options in doing storage and distribution, and we'll consider some improvements in storage and distribution. Next slide. When we talk about storage, we have some mandatory things we need to look at. 16 centimeters or 6 inches above the ground and away from the wall. It is not acceptable to place medical commodities on the floor or close to the wall because one, they may be damping in the floor, they will be destroyed. So goods not to be stored near windows, because one of the things is we don't want direct sunlight to interfere with our products, and there are chemicals. And so that is why we want the stores to have thermal hygrometers, and they should be monitored regularly. They should be in place. Stock, and they should be regularly. You need to consider for storage level. One of the factors is you look at the geography, or a 4-tier system or a 2-tier system. You need to study geography. Look at the population density. How much people are living in this place? How can staffing? Do the staff at this level have the capacity to manage commodities? Do they have the requisite understanding to report? Look at the availability of costs of transport. Look at the infrastructure in the country. What does the country have? Is this transport system available? What are the options? They look at the political and other resource constraints. These are all the things you need to take into consideration before you think of erecting a store, and how are you going to do the distribution system within the storage. Next slide. Next slide, please. Hello, Privek. Can you? Hello. Basically, let us look at the distribution circle. There are two things we need to take into consideration. It's not just moving commodities out. There are two processes. Commodities out, information should come in. If you say you are doing a distribution cycle, it makes sure these two processes are completed. When moving commodities, there should be information to inform the processes. You see, so from the suppliers or manufacturers to the distributors, right down to the retail and customer, and the materials, the information, the financing people in place. So a distribution process does not just move commodities and it's the end. You move commodities, you have information in. At that point, you said you've done a quality distribution. So the processes should be adaptable, and there should be an organization structure aligned to what you are doing. And the technology should be agile, should allow the processes to happen. So all about the distribution cycle is, as I said, it's not just moving the commodities out, but when commodities are moving, the information should come back to inform procurement issues up to the distribution to the last mile. Next slide. So these are some of the basic elements of an effective distribution system design. When you're designing a distribution system, there are certain things you need to take into consideration. So you should take into consideration the integrated distribution and the logistics part of it, and the linking distribution operations to broader public health system objectives. For example, you cannot say you distribute by convenience. You should look at the broader public health picture. What do we aim to achieve? We should look at the strategic plan. What do we aim to achieve within these 5 years? What should we do? How do we do our distribution and our storage processes to align with the strategic objectives of improving systems? So that is the aim. So you have to acknowledge and accommodate customer service need. What do we want to achieve? We want to make sure our distribution system is agile, it's working correctly, systems and processes are in place, and you have to balance trade-off between cost and services, because you want to give the best service, but you should also do cost analysis, how you can reduce cost, getting the best service. You have to minimize lead times, inventory cost. Delays in supplying commodities will cause a lot of problems in the system. So the lead time, you have to see how much you can improve or minimizing lead times. Inventory cost. If you hold too much inventory in the different systems, how much that will cost you. So all those analyses need to be taken into consideration when designing a distribution system. And constantly improving effectiveness and efficiency. You decrease or eliminate opportunities for damage and loss. Those are the priorities. All these things you need to consider them. How can I decrease loss? How can I minimize theft? Those are all the things you take into consideration before you design a distribution system. So apparently, you cannot just be thinking of designing, but you should know that there are certain elements I need to go through before I design a distribution and storage system. Again, I would like to say, for programs to be effective or for distribution system to be effective, it starts from the design, and the designs inform processes, and those processes will transform to training of staff and people implement it. Next slide. So for colleague pharmacists and clinical staff taking critical decision in storage, it is very key that your decisions will influence a lot of things in the supply chain. The decisions you make in terms of storage and distribution will cost the circle a lot of issues. So it is mindful that you understand, there should be an understanding of storage and distribution systems within your context, and especially knowledge and cost of logistics operations. If you need to make sure the inventory system should be, if you set a minimum and maximum system, you should always make sure the commodities are between the minimum and maximum system. Commodities should not expire in your warehouses. There are critical decisions you do. How should I take these items? We are not using these items. Should I report them back? Reverse logistics component of the items. So it is very critical as a pharmacist or a clinician who is in charge of medical commodities to know that the storage and distribution of this commodity is critical. Whatever decision, if you make products expire, it will cost a lot of money for reverse logistics, and it will also dampen a lot of life because some other facilities might need the commodity. So your decision is paramount when it comes to storage and distribution. So I advise clinicians or logisticians who are pharmacists to concentrate in this area. It is very key. Next slide. So some of the key activities in a PSM function. So as PSM colleagues, there are several activities you can involve in. One of them will be selection of pharmaceuticals. This is a scientific process wherein you have cost-effective medicines and you want to make the essential medicines list. These are areas you can involve in and give your inputs. And these medicines should be effective and should be safe and it should be cost-effective for the country. So these are areas for PSM staff to come in and contribute. In the areas of forecasting and quantification, you have to partake. You have to produce data. You have to come with assumptions. So it is very critical for PSM staff to partake in forecasting and quantification, and which will lead to effective procurement. If the systems are not right, then the procurement will also not be right, because from that stage, the PSM staff need to be involved. Then in ensuring product quality assurance of the product, the PSM staff need to involve. From the receipt process up to the end use, there should be quality assurance processes. Those are all areas wherein PSM staff should be involved. You can also involve in developing inventory management and distribution processes and the tools, how to manage the commodity, what inventory systems, how do you reporting systems, then also in training of staff at all levels and the processes and the tools. So these are kind of things wherein PSM staff need to be involving, because if the staff have the knowledge, they will report well. If the data trigger well, there will be effective forecasting and quantification. And once that process is complete, then procurement will also be okay. So the system will trigger to the storage of the items and distribution. So the process will be complete. So these are opportunities for PSM staff to be involved in. These are the areas you should focus in. Next slide. So some of the goals of storage and distribution. Why do we store commodities? What do we want to achieve? We need to set clear performance targets. Like I said, in the health strategic plan, we have a target that we want to do this. Let's say we want to reduce child mortality or want to reduce maternal mortality. these are the target for, let's say this is the target for the country for the next 5 years. And there are things the PSM staff should do to make sure this target is achieved. So the primary goal of the logistics system, we should know the aim is to complement the strategic thinking of the country. The importance of cost-benefit analysis in driving systems, design, and decision-making. Before you implement or you bring up any new system and designing, there is cost implications in all the systems. So you should do critical cost analysis and see, based on the geography, based on the population, based on other critical things, this system is what will work in our setting. So these are all important considerations we need to put in place for storage and distribution. So these are the basic goals. Next slide. The overarching processes of effective storage and distribution. Well, like for example, the development of specific goals and key performance indicators. There are indicators that we should know. These indicators should be realistic, and these are the indicators aligned with our strategic thinking. So they should be specific, and we should have those indicators monitored. And for storage and distribution activities individually, we have indicators for storage, we have distribution indicators. Those are the indicators we put together to measure your performance. When you set KPIs, they should be implemented, not just setting KPIs. There should be a way to track your progress. Am I in line with the strategic thinking? Are we doing well? Are we storing commodities based on these indicators we want to achieve? So these activities should be undertaken. There should be cost analysis at each step of the storage and distribution. Do costing, know exactly what is the cost of storing. If you have high inventory, what is the cost? Low inventory, what is the cost? Moving commodities from point A to point B, there should be effective cost analysis to all systems. So before you achieve good storage, which system you can determine which system to use. And there should be harmony between storage and distribution activities. There should not be separation between these two activities. They have interlinked. There is no way and distribution and storage can be different. They should be implemented together. There should be harmony between these functions, and they should link so that you achieve the desired objective. If you want to say you want to reduce maternal mortality and you want to supply oxytocin in some peripheral facilities, there's so many things that come to your mind. I should supply these medicines on a timely basis. It should be stored on cold chain areas. What are the tier system we have? Do we have a 3-tier, a 2-tier system, or a 4-tier system? How are these going to be stored in the various health facilities? How are they going to be distributed? Those are all the things you need to have in mind before you implement the strategy. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. So storage systems type, there are mainly 3 types. Most times in the Central America stores, you have the mechanized warehouses where we use machines, mechanical handling equipment, because those are appropriate because goods come in bulk. And there are some areas, especially in the 2nd tier, if you're using a 3-tier system, in the 2nd tier, you will see smaller warehouses. So basically, they are manual warehouses wherein the goods are stored in some pallets, in some shelf, like in the district or the province. So you see that type of warehouses where they receive small quantities and they can operate manually. And there are other the other ones, we call them the storerooms or the pharmacies. Those are just areas they keep for dispensing purpose. So they are like mini smaller stores where in the refrigerator things will be stored, and they have their narcotic cupboards or the psychotropic agents in their cupboard. So those are like the way storage systems organized. When you come to the central stores, you see machines because they store in bulk and they are mechanized stores. And when you go to the district or the provinces, you see some manual labor happening because they store small quantities mostly in their shelves. So this is the storage system types basically we have. Next slide. There are key questions you need to ask yourself. One of it is, what is the interplay between storage and distribution? How are these connected? How do I harmonize them to come together, making sure we achieve the desired effect? This is critical in designing a storage and distribution. What are the factors affecting both of them? Because you need to look at, if something happens in storage, what will be repercussion in distribution? For example, if there is high inventory in the stores, and there are going to be huge volumes in distribution as well. And if the storage cannot accommodate more commodities, then the procurement will not procure more commodities. So there should be critical thinking on these questions. What are the strategies we need to do to achieve harmony between both? They should be harmonized. This system, there is no way to detach storage from distribution processes, because when you look at the distribution process or distribution cycle, it starts from the procurement phase of releasing commodities to our central medical stores up to the time the data comes back to the facilities. So you see, when the products leave for our central medical stores, there is going to be port clearance, there is going to be inventory, there is going to be storage, and there is going to be distribution, all of those processes. So there is need for harmony between those two activities. Next slide. So the interplay, they can be inversely proportional with the elements of trade-off incorporated in their collaborative implementation. So this just tells you the functions of storage and distribution should be harmonized. There should be critical thinking in how we do these systems correctly. It is crucial that we organize during the planning of both functions. So we don't need to plan the systems in silos. We need to plan them as one unit. Because if we don't plan them as one unit, it's going to be problems, because they interplay, they interlinked, and there are so many processes. Like I said, the distribution cycle starts from that point where commodities are released. You have to do port clearance, coming to your warehouse, inventory. There's so many other processes, then commodities are released to the facilities, they will have the information back. Next slide. Okay. Systemic planning for logistics. It's important consideration during logistics planning. There are critical assumptions and strategy for organizing of storage. You have to look at the population density, the mobility, and consideration of epidemiological data, the program and public during logistics health priorities. There is health priority, and you have to look at what is the health priority, what is the population density, what are the current challenges here. So there are the assumptions, and the strategy should be based on this thinking. You should also acknowledge the current and future end news. Do we have program plans? Do we need to expand? We are distributing ARVs, and there is going to be a program. There is a current expansion. So there should be future thinking. What are the needs? What are the needs of the users? So in designing logistics system, those all are critical in bringing them together. Next slide. Next slide, please. So let's look at the distribution cycle. Like I said, it starts from when procurement, let's say for local suppliers, once the vehicle leaves their warehouses to distribute to our central stores or anywhere we design them to pair, then it starts. Or from the international phase when the ship is leaving the manufacturer's place. So these are so we have procurement. From the procurement phase, there's port clearing, and there's reception and inspects commodities, there's inventory control, storage and inventory management, requisition and allocation of supplies. Because when you receive and inspect, then you do inventory control, the items are stored, and there is proper inventory management. And we expect facilities sending their requests if it is like a pool system where you're doing or do allocations of supply, and then we deliver. Depends to either it's collection or a delivery system we are using. Then products are dispensed to users. The last thing in the cycle is getting back the report, the consumption data, utilization report. We need this data to inform procurement before the distribution cycle continues. There is no way one element of this detracts from the other. If there is no correct consumption or there is no utilization report, it is difficult for effective procurement, because it is the consumption data that informs the forecasting and quantification, which leads to procurement, and the cycle continues. Next slide. So in receipt and after procurement, the items come. So the receipt and inspection activities normally are taking place in the central warehouses. There should be physical verification and quality checks of all the products, because these are pharmaceutical products. We don't just accept them into our system. We verify and do quality checks. There is also quality assurance part of it. So in receipts, these are some of the things you check. Is it the type of drug we request as the contract says? What is the quality? What is the presentation? The packaging? Does it match what we requested for? And the technical specification against the agreed contract. So these are all the things you need to look at. Once you have the document and you have the contract, you should verify this one. Then you should also verify the products are received as per the information provided in the invoice. They might say this is what's in this carton, but when you verify, they might not be the same. So you need to verify. Then you should initiate an insurance claim if there are damages to supply. So in the receipts, these are basic functions that need to go through before items are accepted into the warehouse. Next slide. Next slide. So, most arriving goods will be insured for damage during shipments. So you have to inspect and make sure it's in reporting. For most insurance companies, you receive notification of damage within 3 days of leaving the custom clearance. That's in the Incoterms, if it is CIF. Because Incoterms is basically the commercial terms wherein there's an agreement between the buyer or the shipper who is going to take responsibility. So that one should be specified in the contract. So these are some of the Incoterms, the DDP, DD, or those 3-letter words mostly used in the contract to tell you who is going to take responsibility responsibility. In Incoterms, we'll say once the items leave the manufacturing place, it's the responsibility of the buyer, or they will tell you the responsibility of the manufacturer or the supplier right to the central medical store. So this all need to be specified in the contract document. If loss or damage is not apparent at the time of the consignee takes delivery of the goods, what the consignee should do, it should give notice of the loss or damage to the carrier or their agent. You need to actually verify things together, and you should make sure you follow the contract. If it says you have to report within 3 days, you need to report within 3 days. It's just telling you the inspection process and follow as agreed contract. So there should always, in the receipt, there should be verification against the contract. Once there are deviations, you also need to report. You need to take the deviations and report. Next slide. You don't need to be an insurance expert, but you need to know when you need specialist advice. If there are things you want somebody to advise you, you need to call for an advice. And you need to be able to manage the receipt process. On arrival, claim notification have to be made within 3 days. Like I said, it depends what is specified in the contract. So it should notify. If it says if there are any deviations or damages, notify the supplier within 3 days. You have to quantify together and report within 3 days. Because if it says it is 3 days before it reaches within that time to reach the insurance company, keep it within 3 days. The question here is, who are you going to notify? So in the receipt process, you need to also know what is your chain of command. Who are you going to notify? If you know there are bureaucracies, so the system should set in such a way that within that 3 days, the insurance company is notified with the appropriate documentation in place to say these are the issues we find during the receipt process. Next slide. Next slide. So let's look at some basic distribution structure. So it depends to the tier. If you're operating in your country is operating in a single tier system, coming to central medical stores, they may go to a district, and before it reaches the health facility, or to regional medical stores. If you're operating on a 4-tier system, and say your goods come to our central stores, they go to our regional stores, they go to the district stores before they reach the health facility. So these are basic the distribution structures in which countries look at what is their best fit and adopt structure based on what we said, the geography, the population density. Those are all the criteria then before you develop a tier system for your country. Next slide. So when we talk about the distribution system, all the activities and the processes to ensure that the pharmaceutical and health commodities reach the end user from the manufacturer in adequate quantities in a timely manner while product quality standard is maintained in a cost-effective manner. So when you design a distribution system, that one should be the priority. This commodity should leave this place, point A to point B, in their accurate quantities and their quality maintained throughout the supply chain. In the current global pharmaceutical scenario, distribution system can be categorized to 3. For us, in the low and middle income countries, we have our distribution system. So when you are designing, you need to know which region, which location, which country are you designing a distribution system, because it's based on, you have distribution systems for developed countries, distribution in humanitarian emergencies. All of them have their their systems and how can it design. For humanitarian emergencies, commodities should move fast, so we should design a system in those areas of disaster. Let's say, for example, you say you are going to wait for data before you move commodities in emergency. No, sometimes you do allocation first, then later the data comes. So these are the scenarios, the three types of this we are doing for humanitarian emergency and disaster. Those are all the things you need to take into consideration. Next slide. Next slide, please. So at broader level, we can classify the systems into two. Let's say if you take the distribution systems in a low and middle income country, you can also classify that one into two, whether it is a centralized system or you want to see a decentralized system. So when you talk about a centralized, the supply model, the procurement, distributions are all coordinated at national level. So all the coordination aspects happens at the national level. So most times you say those are vertical systems, and generally there are three tiers, starting from CMS to region or district, finally to service delivery points. Because when you centralize the coordination and there is a way that you move to another level, tier system, right to the health facility. And there are decentralized systems wherein the districts or regions are responsible for receiving, they are storing and distributing medicines according to their needs. In some cases, they may also be responsible for procurement of the commodities. So, like for us here, the Local Council Act says some decentralization, some functions are dedicated to the local councils. They can also do procurement. So, in decentralized system, that is what you see. But once you centralize distribution systems, it means all the modeling, the procurement, distribution, all the coordination part of those things happen at central level. You see, unlike the decentralized system, wherein some functions happen at the district or regional level. Next slide. So we have mixed systems. There is no one system that is perfect. But if the systems are too fragmented, there could also be a problem. Like, for example, mature programs, like the nutrition program distributing vitamin A, the EPI program distributing vaccines, the contraceptive programs. If you have too much of fragmented programs, and they can give rise to problems. So the system it is desirable to have mixed depending on the situation of the country, but too much of distribution systems will cause a lot of problems in the system. Sometimes the specialty needs of certain commodities in the market forces the need for multiple approach or neglected disease. Like for orphan products, we know because of there is a lot of improvement in health systems, and some products that we are using, we are distributing much, we no longer distribute them much because of, let's say, the disease burden of that particular commodity has reduced. So you have to consider those special events before it is designed. So sometimes you don't need to use one fix, say, I'm going to use the distribution system. You can use mixed system based on certain parameters. So these are things you need to consider. It is better to have more of integrated systems than you have too much fragmented. But like I said, there are some donor programs that would definitely say because of their special needs, they are running the vertical program. So you have to take that into consideration. Next slide. Next Next slide, please. So these are some of the key points on a mixed distribution system. As I said, so you have to take a careful and full consideration of all factors when you design a distribution system. In medical product distribution, one size does not fit all. You have to do analysis. Am I distributing orphan products? Am I distributing vaccines? Family planning commodities? What is the best fit? So but just know when the systems are highly fragmented, it's going to lead to a lot of problems. If there are multiple distribution systems, it's going to lead to many problems. So try and keep as much as possible. You can have a mix of distribution system based on certain parameters, but the system should be more integrated. Having multiple donor funding and vertical programs can drive undesirable fragmentation in distribution system, because of the donor requirement, and these things should go this way. And once the programs are vertical, it becomes challenging for even a country to manage within their own system. So you have to push to the donors. These are the things, this will drive improvement in the country. So more, like I said, more of integration than we have so many vertical systems. Also, you have to take note of the marketplace consideration to detect the type of distribution system. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Take into consideration when designing a distribution system. Sometimes the external circumstances also detect things that you cannot handle. External, like say, will detect to you that, let's say, this donor say these items should go this way, and you have things into consideration. These key points when designing a mixed distribution system. Am I going to do a single one to be distributed? And other commodities, like I said, orphan commodities, most of us, if you live like for a decentralized system, where in the district procure those blocks, in fact, even they send quotation, even they want to of commodities they are asking. Next slide. In a distribution system, we'll say there are 6 main approaches. Can have one which is fully public. We have in the CMS or the government own, they fund and manage the entire distribution system, and it's what is happening in many countries. You can have which is private supply to government health facilities. We have direct delivery or prime distributor contracts where government operated. So these are some of the models. Then you have the social insurance scheme. We have in public funding from central budgets, and social insurance premium can be used to reimburse patients themselves collecting medicines for, or pharmacies that are dispensing medicines. You also have the private financing and public supply, where government medical stores or state-owned wholesaler may supply medicines that are dispensed by government service delivery points, but paid for by the patient. Like we have the cost of the model. State wholesale monopoly. Like if you have the insurance scheme, you might say the patient So basically, these are the financing models. So it's going to be like which one I'm going to use to distribute these commodities. Is this going to, how are we going, is this going to be fully private social insurance scheme? What's it exactly? Is it fully public? Those are the things, the models we think of. Next slide. Next slide, please. So there are overlap. There are areas wherein the public might do, and there are areas wherein they overlap, like the mix, wherein both the public and private sector can do well. It depends to the organization or the agency. Therefore, we have the highest advantage for the public, and they have advantage in product registration, quality oversight. The market regulations, it is easy because like parastatals within the government system, so it is easy for market regulation. And if there is any product to be registered, it's also easy. And for the privates, there are the areas they can physical distribution. When you talk about distribution, these are areas the private sector will do better than public. In warehousing, because we expect private warehouses to be a bit more of follow the processes of good storage practice. And transporting will also say good distribution processes might happen. So these are the areas we think the private sector will be higher. And there are areas they overlap, like for procurements, like I said, sector can do better. So it is important for you to, you cannot just bring the private sector because you want to bring private sector. The role of the private sector is to complement efforts. So you look at the areas where you cannot do best and the private sector will do better. If you're in the private sector, the government is asking for like, oh, we have a problem. We don't have a procurement agency. The standard. So we can, those are areas you can say, okay, there's a private firm who is doing this better. So it's better you look at the areas of your advantage. If it is for product regulation, registration, okay. For we, the public sector, we can do that better. So these are the areas we need to focus and know where we can bring in the private sector to support. Next slide. Next slide, please. So there are problems when it comes to financing for distribution. And this has been, there is a lot of talk when it comes to financing distribution. When a system is fully public, it becomes, the problem now is government does not pay. If they pay, they will pay late, and they will never pay the full amount. And this will lead to dilapidated dysfunctional systems. If it is private supply to government implementing what the public is doing, government does not pay, or they will pay late or and never the full amount. And that one will produce suppliers who tries to recoup, because they will not pay me early. It will take 6 months. In the next 1 year before I have my money, then in try to recoup that money for the length of time we try to pay. So if it is a social health insurance scheme, for government to pay its portion, it's a problem. Or they will pay late and they will never pay the full amount. Or that will produce low operations, the operational system. So you see, it's all tied to how much financing will come and how these systems will operate. If it's private financing and public supply, there is slow cash, long with flow, but money does eventually arrive. And the function, it's produce a functional system, although it's slow to respond to changes. And if it's a state wholesale monopoly, cash flow is slow, but this will work. I'll tell you this will work. And if it's fully private, there is high efficient distribution system, but few patients can afford to pay. Those are all the pros and cons. The system is efficient, but in your country, can they pay? And if it is fully public, what will happen? They will not give you the full amount. You want to distribute at a certain point in time because you want to achieve the public health goal. You will not. The money is not just available. They will not pay, or they'll give you late. So this is because government never see distribution as important. And they just think items will come and they will go so free. So these are the kind of thinking we need to advocate. We need to make sure in all public health meetings, we need to belong and talk about distribution. Bring facts, tell people, let them know these are the issues we have. Next slide. So getting the donor to pay for distribution, yes, it's possible. Like for Global Fund, allows that distribution costs can be charged to the grant, but it is included in the PSM plan, and that budget is estimated. In that case, the LFAs will take an assessment of the responsibility of the additional PSM cost, and those related to events in management, distribution, they will look at those critically. No percentage are stated in the LFA guidelines, but we'll say 5% if they are using FOB as the Incoterm, is normally considered reasonable for medicines. But if it is BedNet, it is higher than that. So some countries are now demanding that donors pay for distribution and other activities like quality assurance and when they donate medicines. Because if medicines are in country and there is no one to pay for distribution, it's a problem. So the Incoterms should spell out clearly who is going to take the responsibility. If you are doing a PSM plan for the Global Fund, the cost of distribution should be spelled out and it should be budgeted for. And if it's also quality assurance, it should all be in the PSM plan. Cost of international and local transport, warehousing, then other costs should be paid by the donor agency unless otherwise agreed with. So these are all things you need to look at when you do a procurement contract or when you're negotiating a donor. Which Incoterms we need to look at? How do we want this system to work? You see, so it's very important to know that when you do a PSM plan for Global Fund, these are things you need to consider. Next slide. Okay, let's look at financing for distribution. What are the challenges? How to achieve sustainable financing for distribution is a challenge. How are we going to continue to have money to finance our distribution systems? It's very challenging. And we need to recognize that some governments are going to do massive reforms and change before they will be willing or capable of paying for distribution on a regular basis. It may be necessary to build the storage or distribution costs into the medicine price. Because if it's left out, it becomes a challenge. Who is going to pay? Now you buy the medicines. The medicines they should be distributed to the service level point. Who is going to pay? So it is good that this cost be included into the PSM plan. If it is 10% of the cost of medicines, I think this one, because like for 5% for distribution, 5% for storage, it's relatively okay for operations. So I think that one should be considered when presenting a plan or you do a PSM plan. See, because you cannot just buy the medicines, you procure medicines, you use all the dollars and pay for the drugs, and the drugs sit in the warehouses, and it becomes challenging to distribute. So the distribution cost should be embedded into the medicine's price so that it becomes functional in sending commodities out. Next slide. So the key message, you have to encourage, or you have to force donors. You don't need to force them, but you have to encourage to pay for the distribution cost. If Global Fund is willing to pay for distribution, then all donors should pay for distribution. These are the things you advocate. You should advocate. You should have them in the PSM plan. Distribution cost should be embedded. If he just puts in for medicine and forgetting there is a storage part, there is a distribution part, and it becomes a challenge. So know that distribution cost, it is better to be included in the medicine price and medicine cost. Then you have to advocate. You have to advocate, continue to advocate. It is not easy because government is not willing and they don't understand that distribution is a key activity in the supply chain. And once, so you continue to engage. At any time you have advantages in your public health meetings, whatever meeting, show up and show the concerns in getting medicines to the facility. Next slide. Next slide, please. So like there are some guidelines in the design of distribution. So you can manage and evaluate distribution as an integrated activity, like the receipts, the storage, dispensing to patients, information system, and they should be interlinked rather than in silos. So that one is critical in designing a distribution system. So if you know how to receive this product, how they should be stored, how these products are going to be dispensed, how the information is getting back to us. So in principles, this one, you do it as a one entity rather than you say, okay, there is going to be separate receipt systems, storage systems, dispensing, and it's not good practice. You have to ensure that all the distribution systems operate are in line with the overall objectives of the program and public health targets. That is the broader objective. We want to meet the public health goals. We have our performance indicators, the key performance indicators we need to follow. So when you design, you have to look at that area. You have to ensure that end users, patients, they need and understand, they acknowledge and accommodate and incorporate designing. So all these things should be taken into consideration. These are the basic principles. Next slide. Next slide, please. Again, you have to balance trade-off between the cost and service for effective. You have to do some cost analysis, and this one is mandatory while deciding the location and medical stores, because for cost effectiveness, you have to do the cost analysis, what it will cost you. Then you have to prevent accumulation of stock at a single point for a long time. It will cause a massive expiry. You have to minimize lead time, inventory, and cost. And you should be striving constantly for improving effectiveness. That you can reduce the number of stores, contracts, and transport, so that you strive constantly. Next slide. You have also to minimize steps in storage and handling. So there's some cost analysis in design. When you design or you are designing a distribution system, this will mandate you to do some cost analysis. And the budgeted operational planning and cost effectiveness analysis, you have to do it for each level of the system. You have to do it. I want to change the distribution system. I'm designing a new one, or I want to redesign this one. So the cost analysis requires comprehensive and accurate information of the cost to be incurred at each level of the system and cost variation between the same levels in different regions. You also want to take into consideration such analysis to be done on a regular basis to ensure that inflations or rising costs are taken into consideration. You have to look at the in-house costs, cost of distribution system. You calculate first and then compare with the cost of alternative options. So before you bring a private sector to support a distribution system, if you have an in-house system, do cost analysis, look at vehicle wear and tear, procurement of new vehicles. Then you see the need, then you also do analysis for the private sector. So you see, look at if there is need to bring in a private person to help in that process. Like some of the in-house costs include the storage spaces, the store operations, the equipment, staffing, hauling, transport. All these are administrative upgrading and cost of contracting out. All these are things you need to do analysis, do a critical cost analysis, then see if there is need for the private sector to support. Next slide. So if you are choosing a distribution system, you need to look for a right system. And choosing the right system determines the level of efficiency to achieve and evaluate success of the program. If you say, I'm going to do a distribution system, you should plan well, know all the parameters, and choose the right system. So while you are using all the design planning step mentioned, there are some contextual elements you need to look at, like we said, the geographical, the environmental factors, the weather, the political and security concerns. You have to take them into consideration, and it is established. Those are the things you look for. And it's also necessary that a uniform system is applied to the entire country, because we cannot do this system for this part of the country and this other system, especially in large and diverse countries, like when you talk about the China and India. So if it's a uniform system, it's better. So different regions of the country may have different system design and element. So because it's better for a country to manage a uniform system, but also depends to the geography, the environment. It also depends on certain factors beyond your control, like you're also distributing offer products to certain areas. Those are critical things. But by and large, you should choose the right system based on all the parameters that you play. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So for distribution in a single tier system, where the commodities come in country, then are supplied directly to the health facilities. That is one tier system. If you are operating on a two-tier system, the commodities are received to the medical stores and distributed to health facilities. Those are at two levels. You receive Central Medical, the packing, any considerations when it comes to design those. If you and supply are received by central, be in the regions, can be in the province. Basically, they are just levels, three levels. And if you are operating on a portal system. Purchases go to the CMS, can send to the regional, send to the district, and then to the health facilities. So it depends on locations, what are the administrative political things. So these are all need to be taken into consideration before you see. But all of them have their pros and cons. There are advantages in using it. There are also disadvantages for all these things. So you need to know the best fit for the level you want to design for your country. Next slide. Next slide. So some of the distribution models, like what is happening here, they're operating on a two-tier system. The medicines come to the central medical store directly to health facilities. So like what we mean from the central stores to send them direct to teaching hospitals, regional hospital, district hospital, and then go direct to health centers. So that one is a two-tier system. And that one has advantage because there's better visibility of consumption data. It's because you are distributing direct to the facilities and the data also comes to you direct. So it's easy for you to have better visibility. And there is low total stock in the system because of the level, have each level to hold buffer stock, you just have two levels. So total stock, say they are holding buffer stock or safety stock of 1 month. Then at central level, we said, okay, we are holding a safety stock of 9 months. So the total one in the system will be like for 10 months. Compared to a system where we have 4 levels and each level has its own, maybe 15 or 10 months at central level and PH. So it has the advantage to total stock in the system. And it's also less reliance on regional or district stock planning team because all the planning and distribution happen at central level. So it does not rely mainly on the capacity or the knowledge of the district level staff to involve in this. But the disadvantage will become higher transport costs, especially for like you want to deliver items that are very small in volume and you have to take them for a very long distance. So, and there will be lower frequencies of delivery because you're moving bulk items. Maybe you deliver twice a year or 3 times a year. So the frequency of delivery will be, that's a disadvantage because if there are stock out, then it becomes a challenge. So it needs proper planning. Many health facilities not reachable using this formal transport. Yes, because you are moving a bigger truck or a bigger vehicle to distribute, and some areas you cannot access them by this. So it's also challenging. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So also in some parts of the world, like for us also in Sierra Leone, we operate on a 3-tier system where when commodities come to the central medical stores, we send them to the districts and they go to the health facilities. So the advantage of this one, we stock our position closer to the health facilities so they can respond. Then, but it also relies on the DMS stock planning capacity. It means it will help. So it's also advantage because they are involved right in the process. But the disadvantage will be lower visibility of consumption to the district before it comes to central. So because of that line chain command, so the visibility at central will be lower. And the greater risk of pilferage and theft because large stock are moved to those district stores. So there's risk of fraud and theft might happen along the way because they don't have clear visibility at central because the system will mandate you move them to the district and district do their planning and send to. So all those might be disadvantage for the system. So you need to look at the best fit which system I want to implement based on which distribution system. Am I doing it for low middle income countries? Is it the developed nations, or is it for humanitarian crisis? Then based on this, you also design the entire system you want to use, how you want commodities to flow. Next slide. So also, these are some of the things happening in other countries, which systems they are moving. So it's just an example of for you to see how different countries design their system. When you look at what is critical, so they operate in a 4-tier system mostly. So in Tanzania, look at so 2-tier, 3-tier, but it's like a cross-docking. It's a 3-tier system. It's a 3-tier system. But the district is just used as a cross dock. It's a pass-through. We are having commodities come to the district just as a pass-through for them to reach the facilities. So those are all systems that depends on the geography, the population, depends on the situation, and we think which ones to apply in our country. Next slide. Next slide, please. So for 3 and 4-tier distribution systems, you see, the more levels you put in, the more complexity, and even in management capacity. Once you have 4 levels, more complex. How can you manage from level 1 to the central level? So the more the levels, the higher the complexity. So even the setting up cost, you have to erect buildings, the equipment, the vehicles, the operational cost. You have more levels, so you operate at higher cost. Inventory, each level holds a safety stock. So there is much inventory hold at each level. So inventory holding cost will also be higher. So you see, those are so before you design which tier system you want to use, I want to use a 2-tier system, a 3-tier, 4-tier system. You have to look at all the advantages and disadvantages of these systems. Next slide. Next slide, please. So there are certain distribution strategies or systems you need to look at. Talk about the push and pull distribution strategy. Which one? Or am I going to a mix of the two? If you decide to use a pull system, we have in each level will determine the type, the quantity, and they place the order. So we can also call them independent demand or acquisition system. If you decide to use the push at the other level, the higher level determines what type of quantity of medicines they deliver to the lower levels. But this also is based on informed data, because you don't just push commodities. It's based on certain criteria. Like if you operate on a 2-tier system, there's better data visibility. You can operate on a push system, which is like informed push. You use the data and determine quantities. So like the delivery plan is made at the beginning of the planning period, and let's say we are going to deliver every quarter. So, and it's also depend on certain parameters. Availability of commodities throughout the pipeline is also another. So if you are using a pull system, so we expect each lower level to work out their demand. They estimate their buffer stock and they submit a request. And that one is honored. It depends also what is in the supply chain. So you look at the supply chain system, our pipeline full. Do we have commodities to design a pull or push? So we also have operational units are expected to supply. If it is push, that means you do the planning for the lower level. So you need $22 million to do a procurement for a program and you're getting $5 million. Then it means from the right start, you will not have commodities right in your pipeline. Am I going to use the pull? Am I going to use the push? What is the request? Well, you start at basic level. How many TAS system? How the data visibility? Those are things you take into consideration. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. So these are some of the modes we can do of supplying commodities. The interface between the warehouse and the customers we serve in terms of distribution, either they can do collection or deliver. Those are the things you need to look at. And there are certain programs you might say, okay, they should come to collect or deliver. So basically, those are the two modes. So if the collection, then the receiving facilities take the responsibility for collection from the warehouse. If we are delivering, it means we take the responsibility to deliver the supplies. Either in-house or you can give a third party or the private sector contract. Those are all pros and cons. Depends on the system. Things I need to take into consideration before designing a collection or delivery. Next slide, please. So let's look at the advantages. When the collection, the staff come to collect, they have opportunity to interact with other staff within the warehouse or within the management. So that one, and it also provides greater incentive to obtain supplies regularly, because the facility is responsible for collecting the supplies, and it's allowed field personnel to attend to other business in town. They might have other programs. They may attend meetings, like for PHU staff, those of us that work in health facilities in the district setting. You see, they come, they attend monthly meetings, they display data to them. They also have the opportunity to take some product away. So you also offer the possibility of a greater choice of method of transport. They may look at, because of this item is small and the area I'm living is difficult for, so I can either use the motorbike, tricycle, any of the two. They can choose the transport. And it's also allow for better checking, handling, and security of goods, because the staff are coming, they check properly, and they handle the product. Those are all some advantages of collection. Next slide. Next slide, please. So some of these advantages, if the staff are coming to collect, there will be a waste of time for them, especially when you have maybe just 2 staff in the health facility, they have to attend to a patient. And there will be delay in assembly supply. They may spend the rest of the day high, because looking at moving from a factory, on opposed to when you distribute, but may tend to increase the frequency of visits for reasons best known, because they might see at any time a visitor will have commodities, so they might come for every time they just feel like coming to collect commodities. And stockout situation at the end of the long trip of sales may lead to frustration. So, and that's why he or she will become frustrated and will not come again to collect products. So those are all the things we need to look at, whether it is collection or we are delivering commodities. the advantages and disadvantages. Next slide. Next slide, please. So in terms of delivering, people are delivering, there are also advantages. So it helps, so proper routes, it routes how the movement should be by route. There's other interval, delivery schedules are in place, the total cost of transport will be less because you distribute by route. If you also deliver, you can combine with compulsory visits to fill, let's say you want to also to do supervision checks. It gives you also the opportunity during delivery to also do some field checks. And it will give you time to do proper assembly of medicine efficiently. And there should be, it's also an advantage of security control because you manage the process well. So, next slide. Next slide, please. So there is need for reliable transport facility. So that's one you don't normally or breakages and loss of quality. So these are some of the disadvantages of delivery. Security lapses may occur because the conveyor did not take responsibility. Facility may not be ready for receive supplies. You go to a health facility, means the facility is closed and the staff are not available. And there is rush because you have to move in so many facilities, there is rush, and by that they will compromise quality and there will be no damage checks happening because you just say sign for the product and leave them and go. And not always it's cost effective because you move a large size vehicle and small commodities are in the vehicle and you go long distances. So these are the things you look, which commodities am I distributing? Are they small in number? Are these commodities can move with this other routes? So these are some of the disadvantages in delivery. Next slide. So the bottom line is you need to follow good storage practices. And WHO Guide to Good Storage Practice says it all. It covers everything from receipt to dispatch, everything. It is in good storage. So it's a good book thing to read and you go through the processes. But it does not necessarily describe the inventory management. So you can find it Annex 9 Guide to Good Storage and Parts of Pharmaceuticals. It will tell you how you store commodities. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the problems. When you talk about good storage practice, it's sometimes it's quite long at the moment. So you should choose, look at what it saves money in the long term. The private sector has already embraced it because it's regulatory requirement, first of all, because if they do it, the regulatory authority will have problems with them, and they also recognize it saves money. So good storage practice results is far less damage to stock, far less wastage, because if you apply the good storage, the FIFO principles are in place, goods come, the put away time. So all these things should be in place. They are well racked, the store environment, the temperature is. So once all these things are in place, then it saves money because of the wastage rate will reduce. But the public sector just think it costs money to implement, and there is money for storage, so storage practice that will improve efficiency and will make sure products will not expire in the system. Next slide. So let's look at the key role of public sector, logistics, and for good storage. You need to advocate, and you need to socialize the mass message that good storage practices exist and they should follow it. They should consider the minimum requirements for handling of pharmaceutical products and that they are cost effective. Then every storage unit should develop a plan to attain good storage standards. There should be SOP, standard operating procedures, which follows the good storage practice, and they should be followed. The basic message is why? Why do you spend millions of dollars on buying pharmaceuticals, which are being manufactured using the highest technology in the world, and then you keep them in condition, destroy them? These are the questions you should ask us as managers. You spend millions in procuring commodities, but you ignore good storage practice, and you destroy them easily. So these questions should be answered before you design the SOPs, and they should be implemented, and there should be risk mitigation systems in all. So advise you. Next slide. Next slide, please. So bar storage is storage health products. So the key message here is, let's say your CMS would cost 2 million medicines. If you reduce wastage rates from 7% to 3%, then you save money, lots of money. You can save up to $100,000. And there is a lot of things you can do with that money. How many staff you can employ? How many more medicines can you buy? So good storage practice saves money. It is good, it is cost effective to implement, but you see in the implementation, in starts of implementation, it costs money, but it costs long-term savings. Even if you do financial evaluation investment, it will tell you if you implement good storage practices, it will save a lot of money. So why keep on spending dollars, millions of dollars, procuring medicines, and you fail to implement good storage practice? Next slide. So like for the personnel should be adequate, remember, because for a code rule can say one staff per 100,000 on essential medicines. If you are buying ARVs, for every $300,000 you need one staff. So these are some code guides which tell you how many staff we need to manage this system. So if you have members of the senior management, you should experience counts in managing pharmaceuticals. You should have at least 7 years of relevant, talk about relevant experience. That is in supply chain practice, in pharmaceutical procurement, and you should also have maybe a full qualified state registered pharmacist as a member. Those just employed staff to be in the logistics system, installing common, distributing common, start training. They should have training. Should be continue to review the training and on the job training. And next slide, please. So there is need for improvement. We need to improve in our practices. What we do, there is need, because there are changing treatment strategies, and there are threats, epidemic systems. It will be difficult for us to move forward. Our pharmaceutical systems need to be dynamic, and they should be constantly changing and upgrading to enhance efficiency in achieving public health goals. We should look at the public health goals, design our pharmaceutical system, design our storage and distribution system to meet that goal. There are threats we need to go to. There are emerging emergencies. So there is need for us to improve. Next slide. So these are the salient reasons why we just need to improve. let's say this program begin with medicine kits, they move to a requisition-based system, and the number of items increase. We have a whole lot of items to handle now, so there is need for improvement. So the storage point we choose while ago, very long time when we started the program, it's a small program. They might not work, they are outdated. So we need some additional points. So they're thinking, there should be thinking around how we improve the system. The record keeping reporting system needs to be modernized. What we used to do 10 years ago, 8 years ago, need to modernize. We look at staffing. We need additional staffing based on certain parameters. We need training. We need refresher training. Those are all things we should be doing. And there are so many issues. So there is need. These all the things I need for improvement. So if you want to implement good storage power and distribution practice, there is need. There are so many emerging issues that are coming, and our supply chains will focus on public health goals. Next slide. So I want to thank you. I want to stop here and thank you for your time for listening. And there are some useful materials you can go through and see how much you can digest and implement in your country. Vivia, thank you so much. Over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdul, for your time and for your for sharing the important facts about Module 6. So now I will ask I ask my candidates to ask the question if you have any. So the floor is open to you. Please go ahead and please ask question with Abdul if you have any. You can simply raise your hand and put your mic on unmute, and please go ahead with your question.
Can I go ahead, please?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Francis. I just like to know if you can share us the link regarding the good storage practices, the WHO good storage practices guide. Can you share the link with us, please?
Abdul, the question is for you. Please go ahead.
Yes, so I think Vivia, after this presentation, the link will be available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, hello?
Yes, hi.
Hello?
Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, I am Mr. Onana. I want to know, in the design of the delivery system or distribution system, are products obliged to pass through all the level of the network of distribution, or we just need to get data at all the level? Because I can give an example. You have product coming from a port or airport. You have a air facility or a region who is near the place of airport. Do we need product to go first through the central medical store before going through the health facility according to the distribution design, or this product can go directly from the airport place after all the check and just the data sent to the central medical store, something like this? Thank you.
Yeah, maybe if I can respond to this, it's a good question. Like I was talking about the tier system used in the country, and also there are some considerations. So if you are operating on a two-tier system, let's say one-tier system, then products come directly by flights, the checks are done. You can send them direct to the hospital where they are needed or to the health facility where they are needed. If you are operating on a two-tier system, they come to the central medical store, it goes to the facilities. So it depends on the country situation, which system are you operating? You see, but there is a lot of considerations like distribution of bed net. You see, from the port you can send, it depends to the system you want to operate in distributing bed net. Do you need to store bed net at central level or do you need from the key direct delivery? So it depends to the system you design. So which style system are you operating? So it's possible, yes, the product will move after those checks direct to the, it depends on the system you're operating.
Thank you, Abdul. Any further question? Also, we will be sharing the PPT and the recording with you soon. So you can go and check again this module 6. Also, if you have any further question, please you can email me on my email ID courseadmin@Empower School of Health, and I will forward your question to Abdul and our SME as well. So we'll get back to you with your answer soon. We have some questions in our chat box also. So Abdul, I would like you to please refer the chats as well, and if you can find any question related to today's topic, so please answer their questions.
Yes. Let me look at the chat box. So somebody's asking is it about the LFA? Let me explain about the LFA. We know LFA is local funding agents. Those are the people that do checks for the Global Fund. In the Global Fund system, when you go to the Global Fund books, you see they will explain more about the local funding agents. But those are processes from the Global Fund. Those are the people that will look at your internal systems and you do evaluation. So it just means the local funding agents for the Global Fund. And somebody is also asking, so Yusuf Jallo is asking if there are any good distribution practice requirements for APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients and excipients in place. Of course, that one is good manufacturing practice. That is not good, we call distribution, but it's also part of the good distribution process, but you have good manufacturing process, and that one also will explain to you how pharmaceutical ingredients are manufactured and distributed. Of course, good distribution practice is just telling you how the system should be in place, what you should do in moving commodities from one place to another, what are the required temperature requirements, everything. So just go to the annex and read, and also read good manufacturing processes. That's all will. I think Privia, and somebody's
Okay, thank you. So thank you all for joining this session. As I said, the recording and the slides will be shared with you after this session. And thank you so much, Abdul, for your time again. So let's end this session. Please allow us to end this session. If you have any other questions, please go ahead, please ask, or you can email me on my email ID. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you.